also have very little flavor, because a muscle that is underworked is a muscle that doesn't develop a lot of flavor, which is why veal tends to not taste as flavorful as like several-year-old steer. Here you've got ribs, which are mainly involved in breathing. They're also where a cow stores a lot of its fat. So good ribs should be substantially fatty. It's also, since you're breathing out a lot like this, there's a lot of connection going on. So like ribs are connected to the rest of the body, and there's connective tissue there, which again I'll get to in my discussion of collagen. But it means that they're also fairly worked, and this is probably my favorite part of the cow and the pig is the shoulder, because the shoulder does a lot of load bearing, some of the most load bearing that in an animal, which means that it's really heavy, it's really overworked. It's really tough, and it can't be cooked. It's really going to be chewy unless you're slow cooking it in a braise or a soup for a really long period of time. However, it does produce some of the most flavorful meat you're going to find on a cow or a pig. So that's about it for protein. Any questions on protein? Yeah.
Where does the New York strip come from?
Strips come from this area, which is also where ribeyes come from. It's like a lot of the prime steaks come from here. They have a moderate amount of work. A lot of those cuts are distinguished by how much fat they have and where their bone placement is, and also are they a continuous piece of muscle. So a strip is a continuous piece of muscle that's cut against the grain of the muscle. A porterhouse is the tenderloin plus the strips. You've got the tenderloin bit here, then the strip here, fix the bone in the middle. For proteins? Cool. Oh, yeah. Sure.
How does this work with the tofu beast? Is the
I'm so glad you asked. So this is your modern continental Western tofu beast. It's distinct from the Asian tofu beast, which has this skin here, which is why you can find fried tofu skins in a lot of Asian markets. This is an undifferentiated mass of soy that has somehow acquired enough sentience to move. There's been a lot of debate in the scientific community as to whether the tofu beast is an aquatic, land-bearing life form. If it were an aquatic life form, it would just be this kind of raft thing. Tofu could be harvested in this way by people coming up alongside log canoes and taking large pieces of metal and skimming off the top. Whether tofu beasts are a single creature or a colonial organism is somewhat unclear. I think the distinction is academic. As for a land-bearing tofu beast, there's some concern as to whether it can move. There are some schools of thought that there is a feet on the tofu beast. I tend to believe that tofu beasts just move by their corners, sort of waddle. There's also someone at the University of Michigan who believes that tofu beasts are able to bunch up like this and just like smooth out. But again, it's a lot of conjecture. Stacey, good question.
Based on your drawing and the known anatomical similarity between pigs and humans, which kind of human would you choose to be? Given the
legs.
necessary.
Legs are one long fiber. Ham comes from here in the pig, ham spurs. The legs are one continuous muscle for at least portions of the leg. They have a lot of load-bearing work. They probably we good? Cool. Okay. Let's talk about sugars. There's two ingredients I want to talk to you about sugars. Namely rice and potatoes, and just talk about different varieties of rice and potatoes and why they act differently, and then talk about some sugars more generally. So you've got three types of grains of rice. You've got your long grain, which is what's grown in the US for the most part. It's called basmati. You have your short grain, but your medium grains, which are like your arboreos, and a lot of Italian style rices are that way. You've got your little nut bits. And so a rice grain is, well, once you take off the bran and anything that makes it brown rice, is more or less pure starch. Why do these 3 grains of rice actually, this is what we use in sushi, risotto, biryani, or like any kind of like just normal rice thing. Really sticky, exudes a lot of starch to make like thick risotto, stays more or less discrete. Why? It's partially because they're different shapes, and this one will break down a lot easier and exude a lot of the starch into whatever you're cooking it in, whereas this one's much more likely to stay whole during the cooking process. The other reason is that rice contains 2 different types of starch, and starch is just a bunch of sugars and a line of polysaccharide. So you've got like basically something that's a straight line, and something that's some weird complicated thing. This long grain rice has a higher proportion of this to this. This has a more even proportion, and this has a much more higher proportion of this to this. When you heat starch in a moist environment, so it's not burning, and when the starches start breaking out of the individual rice grain, they start playing with each other. This can't really do a lot to play with other starch granules because it's a line. They can't really do a lot. This, however, can have a lot of fun. This can join up with other starch granules, and because starch is a sugar and sugar is sticky, they form sticky balls, which is why this is optimal for sushi rice and rice that you're eating with chopsticks, because you can just sort of bunch them together. So it's really not just about the individual grains, which I thought was kind of cool. So that's rices, and then there's potatoes. And potatoes, there's also 3 common types that are used. You've got your red skin potatoes, or your blue, or your yellow skin potatoes, they're called new potatoes. You've got your russet potatoes, which have a yellow flesh inside, and you've got your like, monstrous baking potatoes. I don't really know about the individual starch contents of these as to why. Like, this has the most starch, this has the least. I'm not sure what else goes into a potato, but an important thing to know is that if you cook this long enough, it will turn to mush, because it's basically like pure starches that will like just sort of disintegrate. There's nothing structurally holding the potato together other than its own starch. This potato, on the other hand, has a lot of other stuff in it, or starches that don't very easily dissolve, and so it's going to maintain its shape for a much longer period of cooking, which is why this is used for mashed potatoes, and this is used ideally for roasting. Because if you just like when you bake a potato, it becomes all fluffy inside, whereas this is going to stay kind of like waxy as it always has. So, okay, gluten. Gluten, I wasn't sure whether when I was talking about sugars to talk about like starches as opposed to simple sugars, but gluten is really cool. Gluten is what makes breads chewy. It's a net of proteins that, and I'm including it under the sugars because you get gluten when you're making baked goods, which are primarily bread delivery vehicles. Like other thing delivery vehicles that are commonly called breads. Gluten is a protein. It kind of looks like this when it meshes up, and it forms this elastic net, which then becomes chewy when you eat it. You get gluten from agitating starches. When you stir them a lot, you're going to form gluten chain, and that's why you'll often have cake recipes say, do not overbeat or do like combine or like stir just to combine, because if you create gluten, you'll make your cake more like a baguette than a cake, and that's not good. Whereas things like cookies, for example, or brownies benefit from a lot of stirring because you want them to have a certain amount of chew, and so you can alter your baked good by figuring out, okay, how much chew do I want it to have? How much then do I want to stir the batter? And then, okay, then there's caramelization, which is, I talked about caramelization, I believe, by the wayside. Then lastly, there's